Hello everyone, I'm Shashank and today we are here to present a case study on the decoupled architecture which has become an enabler for us for building a digital learning ecosystem for the Estee Lauder Companies. I'm Shashank, I have Danielle Arnon with me and we'll probably do a quick introduction. Danielle is the Executive Director of Information Technology at the Estee Lauder Companies. She has been spearheading the technology transformation of the digital learning space, the complete ecosystem. Shashank, I've been working as a lead business analyst with Srijan for over a decade now, working closely with Danielle as a head lead product, working with the development teams to ensuring that they are running smoothly. That's the introduction. I'll talk about the agenda. This is today what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about what really we'll talk about Estee Lauder in general. We'll talk about what has led Estee Lauder to go decoupled with their digital learning ecosystem. We'll talk about the features that we have incorporated, and we'll also talk about what's the future and what we are going to do beyond this. I will now hand it over to Danielle so that she can speak about Estee Lauder.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully today we'll not do so much with the slides and have more interaction and discussion. I'm honored today to be speaking with Shash about Estee Lauder Companies and our journey to help our sales associates transform in terms of the learning solutions that historically have been a big pain point at our company. Estee Lauder is a prestige beauty company. We own multiple brands. We're a portfolio company. So from an enterprise perspective, we often struggle because we do have a lot of differences within the brand portfolio, and figuring out where we can actually develop a platform strategy is part of our maturity. So our corporation was born from the premise that being high touch is truly differentiating. So high touch means bringing the best to everything we do. That's our motto, and really engaging and connecting with consumers as much as possible. And continuously, our focus, while our growth is coming from online, we're so dedicated to winning with consumers at retail. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is, how do we really become best in breed in those capabilities and allow our sales associates to continue with our high touch excellence.
Maybe.
Sure. So I kind of hit this slide already, but I don't really read from slides very well. But if anyone has any questions about Estee Lauder or sort of, where we fit into the market, because I think it's important to recognize so much of our commitment to learning and to how we're transforming the strategy at retail is as a result of the disruption that's happening in beauty as a whole. So Sephora, Ulta, a lot of the new channels of beauty have tremendous capabilities around quickly being able to find products, being able to match those products up with consumer preferences, personalize that ritual, and drive conversion. So it's not only about the learning and how we've stood up the solution. It's been done beautifully. We have a tremendous partnership with Srijan company. But for us, it's really about the end-to-end capabilities and how we can focus on really driving the business forward. So the journey really started with the Estee Lauder brand. So that's our flagship brand, who 5 years ago recognized that the learning management systems that were available from an enterprise point of view, so all of us have been through compliance training and the horrible sort of mandated education that we have to sit in front of our computers and sort of check up all those boxes, and they thought this is not going to work for sales associates that need enriching, engaging, snackable content in order to really effectively do their jobs. So they went on this journey that resulted in an incredibly mature operating model, which you can see here, that's largely based on sort of bring your own device, right? Sales associates that work in retail, it's like the dreaded ladies that you see when you go into stores and they've got the perfumes and this is the demographic of people that we're talking about. They're incredibly energetic, incredibly enthusiastic about wanting to pull you into the counter and sell you lots of products. And Estee Lauder is a very complicated brand in that it's multi-category. It's fragrance, it's skincare, it's makeup, and particularly skincare. There's a lot you need to know, believe it or not. It's not a superficial sort of experience at all. And customers now more and more, as you know, they learn a lot of things before they show up to a store. So you really need to be able to kind of drive the conversation and influence the sale, similar to what's happening now on YouTube and other channels like that, where consumers are really buying directly from those experiences. So the long and the short of it is this was really a drive to get capabilities out to an incredibly large sales force, 20,000 plus sales associates in multiple languages. It was essentially because of the lack of capabilities within the enterprise to drive a learning solution. They stood up kind of a homegrown system, initially was not built on Drupal, and then moved over to Drupal whilst they were coming up with a brand new set of features. So of course you can imagine that was a big disaster. So it took a while to recover from that, and 5 years later, we determined as a corporation that, in fact, why don't we look at this solution, how it's come to be, how the different markets are adopting it, what are the incentives and the drivers from a sales perspective, what are the analytics that are showing where we're moving the needle, and replicate that across the entire portfolio. So I've oversimplified what's been more or less a 12-month journey to get the business case, investments, and corral the corporation to say, yep, we actually do want to move towards more of a white label strategy and have differentiated brand experiences, but an underlying platform that's really going to help us achieve our goals. Any questions? So a couple things around the learning experiences. I was explaining it before. There was a reference on the previous slide to use of H5P. So over time, even the style of learning has changed so much. In the past, it was very long, very detailed, very deep learning modules that were, as I suggested before, with skincare and a lot of the product knowledge that's necessary for sales associates to be effective. These were modules that would take, multiple minutes, videos, quizzes, assessments, and we recognize that actually that style of learning has changed a lot, and most sales associates are consuming content and learning on the go, and oftentimes at retail where it's really noisy and that type of thing. So as I mentioned, the opportunity was not only to address the gaps and the redundancy, because obviously every brand says that they have unique needs, but we all know it's the same. The branding and the hero products and all that kind of stuff is going to be incredibly unique. But under the covers, we were very, very confident that we could take this to the next level. While we were doing that, though, and taking into account all these kind of guiding principles around being scalable and configurable and speed to market, was from the beginning and has been our number one driver, we also had taken into account the idea that the learning method and the underlying content strategy was also changing. So that led us to really think about more of an ecosystem play, where we needed to think not only about the content management system and how the responsive web experience was going to come to life, but what was coming next. So you can see here, you've got beauty advisors and makeup artists and all the people that I was mentioning before that kind of, to be honest with you, they were just getting content either from our .com sites or from elsewhere. So we really wanted to give them an experience that would help drive their continuous engagement, for lack of a better way of putting it. Continuous engagement through things like gamification, incentives like free products. They love the free products. And really make sure that we were also unlocking the social features, allowing opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, and ultimately kind of breaking that old school model and offering much more of an influencer-driven experience, because that's essentially the way most consumers kind of look at beauty today. They look at it on the basis of videos, could be anywhere on the ageless consumer spectrum, That is the primary way that people are understanding products, how to apply them, what's going to work for them, where does the messaging sort of resonate with what they want to achieve. And so we've needed to take that that trend in the marketplace and really layer it into what we're trying to do from an ecosystem perspective. So it's not at all about a traditional learning management system, which is really where it started. So the final slide that I'll be speaking about, and then I'll turn it over to Shash to get into all the nitty-gritty details, is we really needed to, as I was mentioning before, think about starting off with one website that served a pretty large market, very mature model in terms of execution, and how could we envision and anticipate the future needs of these personas. So it could be retail managers, could be sales associates, could be makeup artists, as I mentioned, that would primarily, we've got about, I think, 85+% of our user base consuming all this content over mobile. But we need to think about chatbots, we needed to think about wearable devices, we needed to think about, on the top layer, all of the different channels that our user base would be interacting with. Then, as I mentioned, we needed to also be really flexible and adaptable when it comes to the actual branded user experience. And that is, as Shash will probably talk a lot about this, that is actually where a lot of the decoupling strategy has been very beneficial from that perspective, as well as the content creation and ingestion. Going down, I'm reading this from the top down, going down into that kind of like that middle layer, that's sort of where the rubber meets the road for us, and where we've started to kind of make that foray into more of the microservices, thinking about where we can continue to work really quickly, because there is a huge appetite to get the entire portfolio stood up onto a platform by the end of our fiscal year, which is in June. So we've got the entire portfolio and then all of our regions. So the way that beauty products get sold is in stores. So the brands execute through the regions. So the sales associates that actually train the beauty advisors, that have a remit for actually driving a certain quota on a day in, day out, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, they need to be able to be on this solution as well. So what we've needed to do is be really, really strategic about those boxes in the gray, where we build them once and replicate them many, many times, where we have decided to prioritize our energies on certain things. So as I mentioned, Shash, we'll get into some of those details in terms of how we're thinking of it from a roadmap point of view. The final layer of this, which is kind of the prerequisites, I'm sure all of you at some point in the last couple of months have hit GDPR and all of those fun topics around privacy, compliance. We're in the beauty business, as I said, and so compliance around claims and what we say a product can do, there is quite a bit of exposure, as you might imagine. We're a $12.5 billion company, so we take things like consumer privacy and compliance incredibly seriously. So that's one dimension, is just the constant engagement, whether we like it or not, of our legal and HR partners. Similarly, as I was mentioning before, because a lot of this is bring your own device, in our China market, all of our beauty advisors have iPad minis in store. So the beauty advisor may be using the iPad mini when she's in store, but using her mobile phone when she's at home or on her way into work. Bring your own device, and how we actually account for that in terms of giving people some type of reimbursement. You have to imagine that it's almost like this program is almost like running a small business, because there are so many things to consider, and many of the individuals that are using our solution are not our employees. So that's another thing that we often need to take into account. Performance is something that we're obsessed about. So another benefit of how we've actually re-architected this solution, because the content is very heavy. It's mostly videos, as you might imagine, doing the demonstration of how to actually put the products on. And so that's something that we spend a lot of time on, especially in our tier 2, tier 3 cities. It's incredibly important. And retail network connectivity, I don't know if any of you have experience working in retail. It is abysmal. So It's something that we have to constantly work to overcome. And just to wrap this up, it's the user management and security. So as I mentioned, with so many employees being not part of our HR database, essentially, it's very difficult to do user authentication and kind of manage all these different moving parts. So really, the bottom part has some things to do with technology, but a lot of it is process and just kind of figuring out how to adapt the business model. And the rest of it is really where we've been spending the majority of our time around the technology roadmap. Does anyone have any questions before I move on and get into the deeper topics around the architecture and how we're approaching it? Good? All right, awesome.
Thanks, Daniel. Talking about GDPR, we have been implementing it, and it's been really a pain. But you brought up a good point around how the branded, unified, and user experience is what we were looking for, which was one of the most compelling reasons why we wanted to really go decoupled, in spite of the fact that we also had good, we also wanted to hit the market very soon. Each and every brand had its own identity, and they want to really have, they really want to showcase what they really mean, and they want to remain as close to whatever their .com sites are. So it's really important it was really important for us to give them an experience which caters to them and their learners, and they are more comfortable in their own environment. So having such a decoupled architecture where we could actually land everything on React or render everything on React was something that was the compelling one. Quickly also look at the timeline. This is what it has spanned. We earlier had a tightly coupled Drupal 7 system. All the assets and the rendering and everything happened on Drupal itself. We then decided to move away from it. However, directly moving to a completely decoupled architecture takes time. So we decided to go a little progressive. We had our React templates ready, but we housed them in Drupal itself so that we could hit the market very quickly. Really helped us. I mean, this was still reusable. However, we knew that whenever we want to really move to the decoupled architecture, we'd be ready with this. January 2019 is something that we are targeting, where we'd be completely decoupled. All our components are going to be decoupled. You'll have a completely React-based system. All the rendering would happen there. There will be a middleware which is going to take care of the requests, whether they are coming from app, whether they are coming from web, and then pass it on to the backend, which is primarily Drupal. And the system is such where we can actually enable other content resources which can directly feed into the middleware, and then of course render it on the React templates. This is kind of the architecture that we really want to achieve, something that we probably will achieve partially by January 19. We really, like Daniel mentioned, we want to move to a microservices kind of a model where each and every microservice serves a certain purpose. There could be a learning modules microservice which would just serve learning modules, and then we can mix and match those snackable content to produce all sorts of learning pathways for different business, for different beauty advisors and front-end executives. Similarly, tools and badges and stories and community, they all form their own microservices. There will be a service mesh which finally is going to consume all that content from different microservices and then pass it on to the different front-end apps, whether it is an app, a native app, or a web application, or a responsive web app that serves the purpose. When we started with this, this is what we came up with. We had a systems topology defined. This is the 3 tiers of services. We broadly talked about it. There will be an experience tier where all the rendering would happen. There will be an API interface which is going to consume content. The middle tier is where all the action is happening, all the orchestration happens. It consumes content from the backend in form of APIs and produce its own set of APIs to be rendered for each kind of device that we have. The data storage and the code transaction system, of course, remains either Drupal or it's Elastic, or it could even be just a MySQL system. This is what we have been able to achieve so far. Like I mentioned, we are still far away from achieving completely decoupled system, but we are there. There is a lot of traction. There are a lot of moving parts. But right now, this is how the architecture looks like. There are still some. I mean, if you look a little closer, you'd see there are still a lot of components that are not decoupled or might seem out of place, primarily because we really want to hit the market soon. We wanted to make sure that the system is up and running and the beauty advisors are taking advantage of the new system as soon as possible. So you see that a lot of pieces are not really there. One of the most important aspects is, and Daniel briefly talked about, is gathering analytics, where we are able to understand how the beauty advisors and the learners and all kinds of users of the system are interacting, and then we are able to capture those interactions. We are able to understand how they are behaving and whether their learning is at par or not. We can track the progress. We can also figure out whether the learners are actually implementing what they are learning or not. So all these interactions and all these triggers are then captured using an XAPI protocol, and we are storing all the interactions at the LRS level. The dashboards are there, and the larger learning analytics, larger learning KPIs defined for us helps us in gathering all the information, where we know now that yes, a particular user in a particular region is actually consuming a kind of a learning module or not, and whether after learning that particular piece, is she able to actually demonstrate when she's really selling. So this also means that we also capture the selling analytics, the sales analytics, and then combine it with the learning analytics and see how the progress really is. A much wholesome way of really showing whether the learner is learning or not. Any questions so far around architecture that you might want to take? Okay.
I just wanted to make one quick point. Just in terms of being able to, as Shash mentioned, really work in an agile manner to extract the business value quickly and move towards the decoupling aspects over time. And I think that is more of an art than a science. So something that we talk a lot about in terms of being really in lockstep with the brands and personalization of those experiences and going much deeper into an actionable insights type of approach, which is a couple of the scenarios that Shash was mentioning. That's something that we're moving towards over time. And we are also looking at learning at analytics across a number of different pillars. So it's, the learning, the sales, and trying to nest that together to understand the efficacy and then also figure out where do we go next. So part of what has been really beneficial about this journey, and we'll show you some of the features and kind of what's been exposed, is that as we really have worked closely with the sales teams, we've realized, okay, we've got this one gap that we solve for, but then there's a whole set of omni-channel experiences that sales associates are still missing out on. So things like she might have a conversation with the sales associate might have a conversation with a consumer. I default to she because it's mostly women. But so she may be having a conversation with a consumer and look to say, okay, wonderful, let me give you this sample, and then gives the sample and then has absolutely no idea what happens next. This happens on a regular basis. So imagine if we just had some very simple follow-through tools that said, okay, you've learned it, you've done the demonstration, you've had the customer interaction, now you've done the sampling, follow up. How was your vacation? How did that sunscreen work out? Can I ship you your next 3 months supply? So what we've started here in terms of digital learning is one step towards, I think, the greater set of capabilities that we can provide to the sales associate to truly maximize this entire focus on conversion and loyalty, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. So I think maybe when we come again, we'll have a much more elaborate picture of what this architecture looks like, and and we'll likely have hit a lot of the other aspects of the roadmap. But just wanted to give you guys a sense of kind of where we're thinking that we want to go next with this program.
Thanks, Daniel. So basically, I'd like to touch upon some of these aspects that you mentioned. So loyalty and rewards is something that is part of the incentivization, which really eggs on the learner to continue with the app, continue with the portal, and then make sure that she comes back again and again and keep learning more, right? So some of these features, and because she talked about those, I directly jump into those. We were going to talk about some of the features. One of these important features is incentivization. You'd see a leaderboard here, which actually tells a learner where she is in the the whole gamut of things, whether she is learning or not, and she could of course figure out whether the score could be compared over world, over her own store, or even a region, where you are really landing. Are you really performing as well as other people are? This is something that you get out of leaderboards. The other way of incentivization is product redemption, where you can actually, based on the points that you have accrued, you can go ahead and buy products based on those points itself. Great way of really keeping people engaged. They really want to earn then more points and engage with the system more. The stars and badges is a continuous reinforcement method. Every time you are learning something, every time you are viewing a new product or watching a new video, you get some points, and you also get some badges. If you have covered 5 products from a particular product family, you get a badge. You get a little recognition that you really want, and again leads you to come back to the platform again and do more and do better, perhaps from the last time. And that's one of the major features that really compels people. We talked about incentivization. We talked about learning levels is something, one of the most important aspect of the whole digital ecosystem. This is how basically it pans out. You have levels where learners can go through different kinds of levels. These levels are associated with either a product or a different new kind of a demonstration that would happen. All these levels, and then they are divided into different modules. One module at a time, a little bit of a sequential learning where you go through one module at a time and learn through the different aspects of a product or a way of selling and get through it. The system is capable of tracking the progress. System tells you where you are in the particular course or where you are in the particular level, and overall you also get a sense of how you are doing in terms of overall number of learning levels or courses that are available to you. Another way of learning is of course by videos. There are a lot of videos embedded directly into the learning levels, but there are at times where you just want to concentrate on one video at a time and then see what's that demonstration like, how to really do this is what you want to concentrate on. That's where these videos really help. They are categorized. You can of course look at different sets of videos, but essentially a very good way of quick learning. These are usually 1 to 3 minute videos that talks about all sorts of things, and that's where you do a lot of quicker learning. We now directly move on to the future of it, and we briefly talked about it, Daniel, around how we want to expand the scope for rewards and redemption, and the chatbots and area. Maybe something that you can also.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing, which is we started, as we mentioned in the beginning, with one website for one brand. Now we have a platform solution, and we're now focusing on native mobile application development, which is another driver for why we're doing what we're doing and how we're approaching it. So as we imagine more of the experiences that beauty advisors have in their regular consumption, like non-work related consumption of content, it's often now through augmented reality or through other more engaging features as opposed to just like one-dimensional content consumption. So we are exposing some augmented reality and chatbot features in our first native app release. So I think where our mindset is to continue to make these solutions much more in line with the experiences that the associates have playing games that are relevant. It still needs to be relevant, but playing games and consuming information in a much more micro-learning type of a way. So we're kind of just now moving into that next generation of features, and the responsive web solutions, they work fine most of the time because, as we mentioned about the networks, but where I think we'll be able to mitigate some of that with the native solutions is we can have the beauty advisors work offline, download things, and we're going to continue to test and learn.
Right. Thanks, Danielle.
Sure.
That's the end of it, guys. Any questions that you might have for us?
I saw a box that said artificial intelligence. What kind of artificial intelligence are you doing?
So the artificial intelligence is combined with the chatbot at this point of time. So we've done a lot of work thinking about what are the types of questions. It sort of simulates when you have an online chatbot on a website. We've taken that into account and used it for the sales associate when she's at the counter. So like maybe the advanced night repair is the #1 serum in the world. So there are like maybe 4 or 5 different facts that you need to know about that. So we've basically started pumping the engine with the top questions that come to mind to help the beauty advisors reinforce some of those key knowledge areas.
And the other areas of artificial intelligence is, of course, micro learning. When we get to that, the questions that are thrown to the learner would be based on various aspects. It would be based on whether you have been evaluated by your your executive in a way or not, whether you have been coming to the system regularly or not, whether you have been diligent in doing your courses or not. These are the factors that would combine, and AI is then really helpful in churning out these factors and then coming up with a set of logical questions that can be thrown to a particular learner. A newbie would be given very basic questions and some content to read through before she can actually move ahead to the larger questions. Someone who has been evaluated on a better platform as an expert would actually be thrown questions from something like a level 3 or a level 4 because you are already an expert. So that's where also AI helps in learning deeper.
Is this system only available for retail beauty advisors? What about independent ones?
So that's where we're going next. Freelancers are going to become a huge base of retail staff that we're going to be relying on, especially in the North America market. So what we've done with our first foray into native apps is we've created kind of the same reusable skinning approach. So we're going to be piloting that with the freelance community very, very soon. That's a good question.
And another question I have is, how do you often the different advisors who are at different, I guess, retail shops? Like you have some that are Macy's, you have some that are Sephora,
Yeah.
and then you have your own that actually work for Estee Lauder. So how do you guys do that often for them, for the ones that are not part of the Estee Lauder company?
Yeah, so what basically, as I was mentioning before, the entire retail population is organized according to the region. So within the region, there is the tracking of those individuals, even at the stores. So we have market administrators that are responsible for setting up the users, for onboarding the users. It's a very high touch, not in the way I was describing before, but sort of manual process because of the diverse set of individuals. As I was mentioning, it's not like you could just flip the switch and you pull your HR data in and you authenticate everybody and you just go. So that part is very manual today. And that's the key to adoption, is having very switched on market administrators, especially because a lot of changes are happening in the field right now. A lot of the field executives are going multi-brand. So as a result of that, you have to have that interaction, which is kind of the whole point anyway, so that everyone gets better. Knowing at any point of time who those learners are, making sure that they have access, making sure that they're using the solution, and making sure that it's working for them when they're interacting with customers. So Yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of like running your own business for each of the brands. And then there's the translations, which is another huge component of it.
That's the question I was just going to ask. How
Okay.
do you find the multilingual and the translations and all that sort of requirements in there?
It is our biggest pain point. We're actually working with Srijan right now to see what we can automate in terms of, trying to get the content ingested, quickly translated, because it's a time to market. Not only do you have to go through all those hoops, so times number of markets, times number of languages, times number of brands, you need to figure out where you can get economies of scale, and it's hard. We're just like at that tipping point now where everyone was doing their own thing, and now we're trying to kind of solution for it. So yeah, it's very complex.
Is the internationalization done in Drupal or is it done in the decoupled client?
In Drupal. Yeah. Yes, please.
Do you also run a traditional LMS in that structure?
The Drupal itself works as a traditional LMS. Yeah.
You mentioned you were on Drupal 7 at the beginning of this process. Are you still on Drupal 7 or have you
No,
migrated to 8?
we have moved over to Drupal 8. The decoupled architecture is based on the Drupal 8 system.
For the LRS component that you have mentioned there for the Experience API, did you guys write a custom one for this, or were you able to use an open source solution or proprietary solution?
Yeah, so interesting piece, because the content authoring is something that we have been trying to figure out for a long time. Right now, the systems are using Articulate as the content authoring tool, where all the learning modules are being created. And Articulate itself comes with a set of features that allows you to export in the XAPI format, and that helps us in capturing all the basic triggers that we want.
I think someone else had their hand up back there. Maybe they lost the question.
Anyone else? Any question? Yes, please.
Just out of curiosity, do the associates have a required course of trainings and that they are required to go through, or is that syllabus all kind of built organically through the gamification and
Yeah, it's a good question, and I neglected to mention this in the very beginning, which is one of the big business drivers to move towards a digital platform solution was the majority of the curriculum, as you defined it, was done in classroom settings and using like PDFs, that type of thing. And there's a tremendous cost with flying sales associates all over the world, printing out all these materials, that type of thing. So like wave one digitization was like, let's just get it all stood up so that we can consume it on a website, stop with all this travel expenses. Impact to the corporation was $200 million just to run learning and development for the sales teams in the old way. So in the new model, the way that it works is there's prerequisites. The prerequisite begins in the learning management solution with consuming the content online, and then being able to come into what they call a learning lab, having already gotten a lot of that onboarding information under their belt. And then maybe those learning labs will happen twice per year as opposed to, 4 or 6 times per year. So most of it is switching more to online and is more and more self-directed. Some parts of our business are still a little bit prescriptive. So there's a lot of training, as you might imagine, with respect to those retail personnel that have to open stores. There's security and all that kind of stuff. That's a little bit more prescriptive. 100% of it is digital today. There are about 70 modules that they have to go through. It's all online.
Wow, $200 million is a big number. I'm sure that breaks down into all sorts of things.
Yes.
I know that you can't discuss exact numbers right now, but it'd be really interesting to hear kind of, I don't know if you're in future state yet properly, but your estimate or the actual of the reduction in cost, what's being saved.
I can hit it at a high level. So
Thanks.
the return on investment, we have a 2-year payback. So rationalizing, so it's a couple layers. Part one is rationalizing the field. One of the enablers for rationalizing the field is giving them the tools that they need to be more effective in a multi-brand type of a setting, right? Because you need to upskill them, you need to get them trained, you need to make sure that they're doing the coaching at point of sale. So that's part one of achieving the bigger picture ROI. The other aspect is reduction of paper. Now imagine this is, as I was doing like the multiply effect. It's, you know, all the redundant work that happens, all the travel, tons of inefficiencies and tons of redundant efforts, which could be brought together more now, like in this centralized sort of a way. So our initiative from a tech perspective has a 2-year payback, and if we double clicked on it, to be honest with you, we only base the savings on a subset of our brands. If we exploded it across the entire portfolio, we will overachieve it, for sure. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Great.
What sort of feedback are you getting from the users?
Feedback has been tremendous. I think in part because the sales associates had nothing for so long, and we're just struggling to kind of figure out how to come up to speed and retain that information. In particular, the work that we're doing with the field executives, that's actually just newly launched about 5 weeks ago. The engagement is not only in consuming the content, but it's giving the feedback through blogging features and things of that nature. So what's formed around the learning is really a community where we see that interaction and that the incentives really coming together to kind of make those experiences very sticky. So right now we have 4 of our brands in the entire portfolio live on this platform, 1 of our regions. So as I mentioned before, within the next several months we will get the entire portfolio and all of the regions globally online. So right now the feedback has been great, and the brands and the executive teams have been incredibly positive. So right now we're riding a high.
Does the learning content conform to any standards, like scoring standards or anything like that?
The XAPI standard.
Anybody else?
We didn't talk too much about previewing content and so forth. As you're currently almost, I guess, progressive, and then before you get fully decoupled, are you going to be changing your content authoring experience or workflows based on approval processes, and are you using Drupal to do that, or are you using other technology?
Yeah, the content authoring is, the workflow is based on Drupal. The articulate helps us in getting the content up and ready. It's getting uploaded to the Drupal system, and then it goes through the workflow so that someone wants to verify it or preview it, that gets happened, and then it gets published to the system.
So you're going to continue to use Drupal's authoring system and then just push it out to all the channels?
Yes, because Drupal is the primary CMS where all the content is getting stored. All other content authorization is happening there itself, so it makes sense to keep it there for the learning content also.
So you haven't built any additional previewing or components to that, or?
Not really needed for the time being, because like I said, the learning content is coming from Articulate, where it is already previewed, right? But the videos and the blogs and everything which stays on Drupal, which actually gets created over Drupal, has their own workflow, so people can preview it before it is actually published. So that gets taken care of there. Right. Anyone else? Good. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you very much.